All right, and welcome to episode 6 of the Where Were We Again podcast. The podcast where we just have a conversation. You never know where we'll end up, and we just wind up somewhere saying in the middle of the episode, hey, wait a second, where were we again? And there you go, there's the name. So, well, I am so excited. I am bringing along my friend Matt. And Matt, just for the fans out there, let's hear you say your last name so we all make sure we are saying it the same way.
There's been a million translations of my last name, but the official way to say it is Sassano. I've heard everything from sassafras to, people just give me nicknames all the time, dude.
No, I get it. So I'm Andrew. I am Andrew Burnaby. So let me tell you what, that's got quite, I get that quite a bit, right? So I get Barnaby, Barnable, but the weirdest thing sometimes. So I get it. No, it's weird. So that's why I'm like, let me make sure we get that right. We want to make sure we get that right. So welcome to the podcast. I'm so excited. So I've actually got to see you perform at least twice now, believe it or not. So it was at Kingdom Come Festival last 2 years. Actually,
yeah, dude.
You've been there 3 years now, haven't you?
So, okay, so I did Pit Fest. Which was kind of my first show of 2020. I think it was everybody's first show of 2020. Right. And that's kind of how I got introduced to that crowd. But since I think I've done KCF maybe 2 years in a row, I was supposed to go this year, and then I got completely sick. So I missed out, and I was all bummed out because that festival is like a big family reunion. You get to see everybody. But I was coughing and hacking.
Yeah, so that was my first experience. So I got to kind of meet you, we got to talk a little bit there, but so it's kind of neat to get to bring on here and kind of catch up a little bit and get everybody else familiar with Matt. And so let's kind of start there. So let's start with just the origin story of Matt, but then I want to kind of break into the big news of the week after that. But so how did you get into music? What got you started in music, and what got you started down this road?
Okay, man. So music was just kind of like, I grew up with kind of a little bit of a different kind of background, small town in a little cow town called Canisteo, New York, more cows than people. And so there really was not anything much going on. I was born I was born with a lot of just different setbacks that were untraditional to a lot of people. I have two disabilities called dyscalculia, and I have another, I have cerebral palsy as well. So I think throughout life, I always kind of felt like the outcast, like, just struggling to find my identity and trying to figure out like how to feel strong. And I remember like the first time that I ever felt that way was music was like the biggest thing that kind of made me feel empowered. I would like sit walk around town and have my headphones blaring, and like whenever I listened to, a long list of bands, Tooth and Nail was kind of the first record label that got me going on rock and roll. And so I remember just pacing around, walking around in my hometown, and that was kind of the first time that I knew that music was kind of going to be, my calling. And through many years, I eventually kind of moved to Knoxville, Tennessee. My stepfather and my mom kind of helped me, through various different projects. And about 2018, I started my solo project. And so it's just been a huge journey. But I like to say that I write music for the underdog, people with disabilities, people that have domestic abuse issues, all sorts of different things like that. And so that really is the core of why I got started. Is it's the first thing that kind of made me feel empowered, and I want to give that feeling to other people as well.
Well, man, that's amazing. So you've been doing music now for a little bit, but in the last, I would say, probably a year and a half, 2 years, you've really started picking up some big momentum, right? You've got some great new music out there. Correct me if I'm wrong, but I'm pretty sure you got signed to a label. Am I right on that?
Yeah, man. So I was affiliated with Rockfest for quite a while. They're still largely in my corner. The label is owned by Joseph Rojas of Seventh Day Slumber. And so I had gone on, in 2021, I'd gone on 4 nationwide tours with them. And that was kind of my big break into just big touring. Like they are a band that just never stops. And so, yeah, I was affiliated with Rockfest for a while, but because of some time constraints and some other issues, nothing bad, still love them. But they were just kind of like, I think it's best that you just kind of do the independent thing for now. So for the last couple singles, we've been doing it independent, and I've been blessed that Fuel this week just went #1 on Christian rock radio. So I was super pumped about that.
Yeah, I mean, so let's talk about that, right? You just hit #1. That's a big
Yeah.
deal, right? So this would be your first big #1, right?
Well, dude, you know what's funny? It's we're on a 3 song streak right now. So every single that we've done
Oh wow.
since my In Defiance EP came out, Not My Name was the first. Dear God was the second single, and then now Fuel is kind of the third single I've ever released. And ironically enough, all 3 have made #1 status. And so I'm hoping not to break that streak because I'm like,
Yeah,
every
no,
time I
sure.
release a song, I get a mini heart attack. Like, is this going to be as good as the last one?
No, that's great.
you know?
Well, let's talk about Fuel then. So that's the #1 song. So where did that song come from? What's the story behind it? Like, what was your inspiration
Absolutely.
behind that?
So, I like to write songs that are kind of conversation starters, not like, there's kind of 2 ways of Christian music. There's kind of that like back in the day where everything was like a really heavy sermon and it was like just kind of appealed to one crowd. Well, I like to write songs that with deep biblical truths, but that also somebody that's not necessarily a believer can just put on the headphones and rock out at the gym. And so Fuel is all about like the negative things that people have said to you or the long list of people that have tried to kick you while you were down. um, it's my thank you to those people who have been that way to me for, ultimately making me stronger. And so, the song was kind of ultimately like inspired by the scripture, "No weapon formed against you will prosper." And
Mm.
so, it just talks about how like a lot of times the darkness that we face, the people that want to kick us while we're down, you know, ultimately like develop strength and perseverance to like bring you to that next level. And so that's what Fuel is all about. And I recorded it with Josiah Prince from Disciple. Um, this will be my, like I said, third single with him. And it's just an awesome experience to kind of finally find my groove with this kind of music. And he's really brought out the best in me. So I'm glad people are resonating with it. I'm glad that like all sorts of people from all sorts of walks of life are just like, gaining something from that song.
No, yeah, absolutely. And I think sometimes and this is something that's come up quite a bit in our episodes. Like, I think some of out of those hardships and difficulties in life, some of the best music is written from. Um,
Yeah.
well, you mentioned before off air here that Zana was a big reason that we caught your attention because we just put out our episode with Zana, and something we talked about in her episode quite a bit was just all the different things she's been going through over the last several years has really impacted her music, and that really started honestly. I mean, all of her music has had what came from something that she's been going through. Red for War was a big part of that, and especially Stronger Than Death was a huge part of a reflection of her life state. And so just to be able to write from those difficulties, I think sometimes just brings on the best music.
Yeah, I think it's like, speaking of Zana, I think for a while I had kind of fallen off the beaten path. Sometimes you write for so long that you kind of lose sight of why you're doing what you're doing, and I had gone through that phase, and this ties into Zana, but like I had come out in 2020 with a song called Enough, and I was looking for a female vocalist to feature on the song, and the song was all about not feeling like enough in your relationships, maybe going through that toxic cycle of relationships. So we did that song together on the cusp of a fiance breaking up with me 5 minutes before I had to be on stage at a show in 2020. And
Wow.
so when we did that song, it really, resonated with me, but also it just kind of like she was kind of the perfect person to have on that song. And it was really the song that kind of started me on the path again, doing what I'm doing for the reason that I'm doing it. Like I looked out and I was literally trying to hold it together during this set while I got called, 5 minutes before the set from a fiance saying I'm leaving you, and it really, that vulnerability after the show, I was trying, to hold my composure, but I got to share my story with so many different people, and like I said, enough was kind of that this is why I'm doing what I'm doing, to see people come forward and go like, dude, I resonate with that. I've been through toxic relationships. I've been through mental health, battles. And so it really just kind of like shook me in a way. And she was a part of that song. And so it wasn't long after that song was released that I moved on to my next body of work, which then, propelled me to an even bigger level with, 7 Day Slumber and doing the tours and all that stuff. But I have to give credit to that song with her.
No, absolutely. I mean, it's a fantastic song too. Look, at this point in time, if you haven't gone and checked out any of Matt's music, uh, shame on you, first and foremost. But secondly, go check it out. Right. So, like I said, like "Fuel" is the latest single as of right now, and it's number one on the charts, and it's number one for a reason. I mean, we beat out Skillet and all kind of Project 86 and all kinds of great bands. So there's a reason it's number one. So go check out the music first and foremost. But it's just good music too. So that's good. That's such a great story. It's a great reflection of that point. Like sometimes just again out of the hard things, the best music comes. Um, so talking about being number one, latest singles and all that, you may or may not have some more music coming up soon. Is that right?
Yeah, man, always constantly in the lab. And like I said, I've kind of found my home with Josiah Prince at the ranch. And so this is another song that he helped co-produce. And dude, I'm really stoked on this, man.
Oh man, is there anything you want to kind of clue us in on, get us little secrets on that one a little bit?
Sure, man. So, yeah, that song we just finished the cover art for. I think you're gonna love it if you're a fan of like Tim Burton, because we took all these
Okay.
like Burton-esque kind of things. The song is called Happy Family, and this is the first podcast that I've actually even talked about it. And so this is the sixth episode I think you said you've done,
Yes, sir.
and the first time I've talked about this. But the song is um, called Happy Family, and it's all about domestic abuse survival. When I was growing up, my father was a preacher. I got to see a lot of the great things about church life, learn the fundamentals of what I believe. But on the other end, I got to see a lot of the darkness of what hypocrisy can do in the church, because there was a lot of ongoing tensions in my parents' marriage, a lot of unspoken and hidden abuse for years. And the one thing that I had to do throughout my entire life for years and years was smile when I no longer felt like smiling. And, put on this big production, this big show, because I was the pastor's son. And, what would they think about me if they knew all this stuff? And I'm hiding bruises while going to school and church. And all these heavy things were happening. And the thing that really was the common theme was, smiling and putting on the production for everybody. So that's what Happy Family is all about. It's about, that obligation to smile, the obligation to kind of uphold a fake family image, and just kind of what I've been through. And my hope is not only just to tell my story through the song, but that other people maybe come forward and be transparent with their stuff as well, because that's a big part of overcoming it.
Oh no, I mean absolutely, and it's almost sad because sometimes that is something that you hear about that is
Yeah.
that's more normal than the abnormal at this point.
Yeah.
So it's amazing you're going to step up and speak out about that. That's great to hear that. But I think we're looking forward to the new single for sure. But I think it's great. Again, another great story that comes from that. But
Yeah, man,
um,
I would say a lot of the songs that I do are very autobiographical, but I try to cast a wide web and try to relate to a lot of other different situations, whether it's disabilities, whether it's unanswered prayer, whether it's stuff like that. It's just awesome how music can kind of bring everybody together. you know?
Yeah, no, I mean it really is, and I think that's a big part of why we have these conversations is just because I think people don't realize how much they relate to the people that they're listening to. And I think that's the other part too. So that's the fun part. Like so far, this podcast is I haven't just we don't just talk to just musicians, right? So we've talked to like Cindy Blankenship. We got to bring on the mothership. That was a great conversation, and she doesn't play music, but she's heavily involved with music.
Yeah,
Um,
man, she's fascinating, dude. She's an
we
awesome.
we've got some guests coming up in the near future that are in the same boat, that they're not necessarily musicians, but they're heavily involved in music in some form. But and some of these people, like, it is not where, especially for me, it's like this isn't where I never thought I could do something like this. But I think that that's the opportunities is, we get to connect on a different level this way because I get to support some of my favorite artists and help them do their ministry, and I don't have to play instrument or be able to sing to do that. Yeah,
Yeah. How do you kind of find your guests? What intrigues you about a particular guest, or like what makes you want to do what you're doing? As far as just like how do you select what you want to focus on per episode? Is there any particular?
well, and that's a great question. Man, I've been, and I think we've talked about this a few times, but it's just a great story to tell, anyways, because I grew up as a pastor's kid as well, and so I kind of broke out into music a little bit older than some do, but I started out just listening to Christian music, but my taste in Christian music was much more CCM at best. It was more of what you're going to find listening on stage at a church than you are on Christian rock radio. But it eventually broke out, and I started to kind of realize there's more to music, and I started digging and digging. I'm like, I like this,
Yeah.
and it's kind of funny because it started to click on me. I'm like, I didn't know what I could do, and I was part of a Christian homeschool cooperative, and this little homeschool cooperative. I was like, it was like. I would have been about late middle school, early high school age at this point, and they were starting a homeschool newspaper for the cooperative, and they're like looking for people to do something. I'm like, I'll do something. I had no idea what I was going to do, but I was like, I'll do something. And I'm like, I like music. I'll do something music. So I said, like, I know. I'll start pushing about all the new Christian albums that came out. And so I started doing that. So I just go and find out what new Christian album came out. And I said, these are the ones that have come out this month. And then I'm like, I kind of like this. What if I do more? Can I do more? So I started a Facebook page. That Facebook page is kind of where this has evolved from, and it kind of grew and grew. And I did music promotion for a long time. And at the time, for many years, it was called Christian Music Source, and that was it had a pretty decent little following going on for a while. I mean, I
Yeah.
did that I had probably 10 years on that, But then I got married and life got busy and all that, and I missed it because I did do interviews occasionally on that, and there was always some cool stories in that, right? I got to interview some fun people. There's an interview floating around out there with me singing on a tour bus between Brian Headwelch and Fieldy on the Corn tour bus.
What?
Talking about like what it's like to be Christians and dealing with Christian music and all that, and being in Corn. I'm not going to give you guys any clues of where to find that. I look really dumb because I am looking like this young kid sitting between two tough looking guys, and I'm just like, oh man, these guys. But no, they're the nicest guys in the world. So no, they're great. Ask Cindy. They're Brian's a teddy bear. But no, and so I miss doing interviews, and the last couple of years I've been wanting to do it again. I'm like, how do I do that and still manage my work life balance and not
Yeah.
overextend myself? I'm like, well, let's do a podcast. And so with that, it's like my biggest idea, right, is one, I just like to have conversations. I think those are some of the best podcasts, is when you're just sitting here having a good conversation. It doesn't
Yeah.
have to be all thought out and planned. It's like, well, let's we'll talk about some of the new things going on, but let's just have a conversation and see where it goes. And so that's kind of where I started with the idea. But I think it also depends on who I bring on, is where that conversation goes. So I have a vague idea that the podcast is going to be, let's just go anywhere. But the reality is there's something behind it. There's an overall theme behind the podcast where I really want to talk to people involved in Christian music in some form, and not necessarily. And I'm going to clarify this. We've talked about this before, but I'm going to clarify this again. As I say that statement, as I say Christian music, I'm gonna have people who do music as a ministry. So they
Yeah.
may not be doing quote unquote Christian music. We're going to talk about this in a future episode with brutality, but you know, you don't have to call yourself a Christian band to do ministry. You don't have to preach in your song to do ministry. And sometimes that's not always the right choice, because you can reach more people and be in places you wouldn't normally if you're not calling yourself a Christian artist. You could still be a
Yes.
Christian and
Yes.
do great music. And so I wanted to have conversations like that. And part of it is it's a twofold, right? So I'll talk to the artists, but I also want to talk to people that are not necessarily artists, right? So as examples like Cindy Blankenship and things like that. And
Yeah.
it's kind of cool to highlight some of the people that had some, like Cindy's story is great. If you want to go back and listen to that episode. And, we got into talking about how she, her whole thing, and it all really kind of started with a bowl of banana pudding, probably 12, somewhere between like 10 to 15 years ago. I don't remember the exact point at this time, but one bowl of pudding now resulted in her having her own radio show. She helps run a music festival in Germany. She was part of the Grizzly Awards. Like, she has got all kinds of stuff, is working with all kinds of cool people, and it started with the simplest thing. And
Yeah, I know. It's so crazy how that goes on, man. Like,
it is,
I was on her podcast recently as well, and we got to talk, and just hearing her story was like amazing. And she,
absolutely,
like you said, she was also part of the whole Grizzly Awards and all that. I was lucky to win the fan choice with her, but like, it's just crazy how, like what you were saying, like the things that it starts small, and then it just like elevates. Like, it kind of brings me to the story. Me and you have a lot in common. One being, pastor's son.
oh yeah,
And then number two, kind of like when I was sitting there in 2020, my first tour got completely and utterly canceled. I was set to hit the road with GFM. We did one show in Fort Worth, Texas, and everything crashed. So,
oh yeah,
like,
big time.
it left me in a depressed space to where I knew that I couldn't perform, but I had to figure out how to, number one, meet people, talk to people. And so I started doing publications for this thing called Rock on Purpose. And I would write album reviews, and I would do face-to-face interviews with artists. And really, before I had the number one songs, and before I did all the stuff that I've done with touring, like, my way, much like your way, was, just going out and talking to people, man.
Yeah, no, and that's fantastic, honestly, and that's such a great story too, right? And I'm excited because so Mary's actually gonna be on this podcast soon.
Oh, dude, she's awesome. She's my one-stop shop. Now that I kind of have been doing the independent route, she's kind of the one-stop shop that's helping me with these releases. And so, really, I have her to thank in a huge way for, helping me get on radio and helping me get on the podcast. She's a one woman record label, essentially.
Oh, I know, it's insane. Like, I don't think people realize that behind most of pretty much anything you read from a band on Facebook right now is probably coming from Mary in some form. I'm just, she's kind of behind it all right now. It's amazing, and I can't wait to kind of have that conversation with her and kind of talk about how she even got there, right? But
yeah, and I had no idea the power that she held in the music industry for the Christian music industry. I mean, I was literally just so bored and like eating ramen noodles in my underwear, knowing I can't, I was like, I'm not going to be able to travel. And so I just hit her up, and she just happened to be the person that was, number one, kind of the main person for Rock on Purpose. And number two, when I was getting ready to release my first big single, Josiah from Disciple said, talk to Mary. That's who we talk to. And so, like, it's just insane how one little small action to kind of cure my boredom turned into this whole thing where it's like, wow, I had no idea what I was even doing.
Yeah, and I think it's a great point to make, and I think we're really highlighting that well. Is the smallest actions can have the biggest impact, and I've talked about that before. Like, Cindy's story was definitely a great highlight of that. But I think people, I want to highlight this too, is that sometimes even the small actions don't turn into massive things, but they can still have a big impact.
Yeah,
Because
absolutely.
just for example, right? We this gets brought up every episode, but it's true. Is that even you just sitting there playing, streaming Matt's music, for example, makes a huge difference. It's a small thing that makes a huge impact. So even you just going about your life, whoever you are, listening to music does still have a huge impact, especially in today's world. Because if we talk about that side of the world, right, is just even streaming a song. Well, this world is built on algorithms now. So more numbers means more algorithms that pick it up
Absolutely.
and spread that out. So even just playing his music has a huge impact. So, you can have a massive impact by doing small things. And I think that's something I really want to point out as somebody I've been hearing stories and having conversations with artists and people in the music industry for, I mean, I'm coming up probably on 20 years soon of these type conversations, and it just keeps coming back again and again that it's a very symbiotic relationship, whether people realize it or not. You know, we need
Yeah.
your music because your music can really impact our lives and help us grow just as much as you need us to listen to that music and help support you to keep you being able to do that.
It is crazy because I mean the smallest things, like you were saying, the smallest things do kind of count. Like I know everybody gets to see the full package of like, oh, he's got like a number one on Christian rock radio, like he's got an album, but all that literally just starts with me um, sitting on my bed and just writing songs to scribbly to on a I'll scribble out so many different thoughts and things that eventually turn into lyrics, but like you know, it's so crazy to see. Like the other day, I just got a message from somebody in Cuba that was
Wow.
I literally can't even reply back because for whatever reason they've been having because of how that country is, they've been having people they can't really communicate freely, and so he's telling me that he's listened to my stuff and Skillet stuff and all this stuff and how it's made an impact. But like I just always think about like the fact that all these songs, all these things I write in my bedroom and it has such a big impact. It's like, wow, like who knew?
Yeah, I mean, and part of that too is I think that another way that a listener, somebody like me, could help you, is if you've been impacted by what Matt's done, right? Share that back because it's almost like a blind wall, right? It's like sometimes, and I know it's true. I know it is. I've seen it so many times. But I know you're putting out music, and sometimes you just feel like you're just throwing music at a wall, and you're not sure if anybody on the other side is actually really picking that up. You'll get clues like, "Hey, look, I'm number one on the radio charts," but that's just a clue and you don't know, so sharing your story back and giving Matt some clue of like how much that impacted you makes all that difference. I think you're actually bringing that point. You brought that point up on Facebook here a little bit ago. You're looking for some of those stories, because you're working on a project that you want some of those stories to kind of help bring forward some of that to light. Am I right on that?
Exactly. Yeah. I mean, right now we're affiliated with a nonprofit, and one of their things is like, man, we want to see your impact. And I've been all over the country, multiple times and seen so many people changed and all that. And so now I'm just asking people, hey, man, if you have a personal story and how I've impacted you, or in any small or big way, just shoot it my way because then I can send it, and it really just helps things. So that's kind of what we're working on in conjunction with all the music that's coming out and everything else that's going on. So man, that would mean the world if people could see me live, or if they encountered a podcast and I said something that kind of hit home. Anything works like that.
Yeah, and even just saying, "Hey, I really appreciated your song." Even that is just a huge thing because, again, it's sometimes you just don't know, and I get that, because, even for a little bit there, and like I say, I've done a little bit of everything in music, and I mean a little bit. I actually had a stint doing a radio show here in St. Louis market for a little while, um,
Really?
and I tell you what, I was I did. It was a great show, and it's still going on. It's just life happens, and it just wasn't in the cards for me to continue doing it. But I was doing it from 10 to midnight on a Saturday night, and I tell you what, there is nothing more empty than just sitting in a room by yourself, talking into a microphone just like this, saying, "All right, and welcome to, and up next we're listening to, and if you want to give us a call and ask for a request, you can." And the phone never rings. People are out there because I've had people tell me before that they're there, but you
Oh,
just
man.
don't know it unless you're told that they're there, and it's the
Yeah.
craziest thing.
But like I said, man, some of those things just prepped you for where you are today. I remember, like, we have so many similar stories. When I was 17, I internshipped at a radio station as
Oh
well. And
wow.
so, I got to see that whole process that you're talking about of, like, just people calling in, requesting music. But yeah, I don't know. It's crazy to see that. And I'm glad that I'm on this podcast as the sixth episode. So as this podcast builds, man, I'll be in the history books.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Because honestly, this has been great because this has given me a great opportunity just to keep going and connecting with people. Um, and so I'm excited to see where this ends up, and I have no plans to ever stop doing episodes. They might be a little sporadic. I'm not gonna lie. Sometimes life gets in the way, and it might be a month or so between episodes. But you know what? That is the fun of it. Um, because so far none of these conversations have let me down. I have always had such great conversation with everybody so far, and you just never know where it ends up. So this is, it's always a lot of fun to see where things go. But um, now's the part where I start to say, well, okay, well, let's shift things around a little bit. We've talked about the music side of things. Let's
Yeah.
let's let's have some fun a little bit. What do you do for fun outside of music?
Man, so I am a huge, like, I don't know, my brain is just always going, and so whenever I'm not doing music or anything related to music, I always have been a huge fan of, like, '90s, early 2000s nostalgia. So I will literally go to Netflix and watch anything '90s, Ninja Turtles. I will watch all the shows from my childhood. All that kind of stuff always is like the big thing. Are you a child of the '90s, man?
Yeah, a little bit.
Yeah. So what were some of your shows back in the day? Did you have any that were like staples to you?
Man, I tell you what, I think my biggest, so depending when you ask, but I'll say just let's say the late '90s, early 2000s. I'm going to say I'm sitting there watching SpongeBob and Fairly Odd Parents and Jimmy Neutron. Those are like the big ones that I would see a lot. So
Yeah.
I'm a big. I don't know. I don't even know if this is the right term, but I'm going to make it a thing. I was a big spongehead.
Oh, you
That's
were
a
a
thing.
SpongeBob fan.
Oh, big time.
Nice, dude. Yeah, my technology teacher back in my high school, I went to this small town called Canisteo, New York. It was, like I said, real small town. But my technology teacher, when I was in fourth grade, his daughter had, I don't know her name or anything like that, but the legend is she actually had played some part in creating SpongeBob SquarePants.
No
And so,
way.
yeah, I don't know. I never got the full story because it was just first coming out when I was really young. But he was like, I remember, like, in shop class, him, teaching us how to build motorized vehicles with popsicle sticks, and he also was just like, dude, my daughter, was involved in this. So that's the legend. I don't know anything further about it, but um, the technology teacher's name was Mr. Dewey at the time. So I don't know anything further, but the legend is she was involved in it.
Well, that's fantastic. So let's think here. So like, you're a big '90s kid and stuff. So like, is there anything like that stands out about the '90s besides like TV and things? Like, is there anything like if you're out running around doing stuff, like is there a favorite like toy, something like that from the '90s? You're just like, this is my when I think '90s, like this is it. This is where I go.
Yeah. Oh man, just so many. I remember. I don't know if you ever remember those Yak Bats from the '90s. I used to drive everybody nuts with those little, like, you would talk into them and then it would just repeat. It's so
Yeah,
simple.
okay.
We were so simple back in the day, man. But
It's
I
it's not that it's not simple like that anymore. I kind of miss those simple things.
yeah, I don't know. It was just something about that. I always loved to, and maybe this plays into what I'm doing today, but like before podcasting, before music, I used to steal my dad's Christian music cassette tapes, record over them my own radio shows,
Oh
and
man.
every once in a while, yeah. So he had everything from Matthew Ward to all these things. I just remember like having a passion for doing doing radio stuff, and I'd take his old cassette tapes and just record my own little radio shows over them and get in trouble many times. But yeah, I don't know. It was just something about recording stuff and all the simplicity back in the day. I
Yeah.
like doing
No, I
that.
get
I
it.
love the idea that you can just put music out there or do whatever you do and be able to reach out like I reached out to you, yesterday and got a reply today. I like that, but there was just something to the novelty of like back in the day. So I'm always a
Oh
huge
no,
fan
yeah,
of that,
absolutely.
man.
So like I guess that's the next piece of that. Like um if you're gonna look back on those novelty eras and stuff, is like what's your favorite music during, like, I guess let's just keep it broad. Let's not even focus on that time period, but like what's your favorite music if you're gonna be putting something on? What's your go-to? Like who's your go-to? What's your go-to songs, artists? Like what are we going for?
Okay, so early in the 90s, I didn't really start developing my legitimate music taste up until like the early 2000s, I would say. My first like introduction into rock music, I guess, like was Tooth and Nail, like I had said, and the first one was I think it came out in like 1997. It was Blindside. I don't know if you've heard the band Blindside. But
Oh yeah.
that was kind of, I had these four Amish guys that went to my church, and they were like, they had kind of just walked out of the whole Amish faith, and so they were just extreme with the tattoos and the rock music. They
Oh
had
wow.
they had gotten into my life, and they were awesome kids to me, but my parents were like, dude, I don't know. So they used to smuggle like different CDs and everything to me, and that my parents hated, but I loved, and yeah. So I would have to say like early 2000s was kind of where I really got into like rock of all sorts. I really got into like Eminem even. Like he was
Oh
a
wow.
huge big influence on me at that time because I saw like the parallels with the dysfunctional family stuff, and so it just that kind of stuff always resonated with me. But before that, it was whatever my parents were bringing through. So I'd be listen to everything from Stevie Ray Vaughan to Point of Grace, like
That is very
music or
now.
blues.
Yeah, I tend to be just as diverse, but that's definitely an interesting spread for sure.
Yeah, it was everything. It was basically everything. I know my dad was a huge Billy Joel fan, and so it wasn't until like 1999, 2000 that I really just got that tooth and nail in my hand and was like, okay, there's something different here. This is just something that I
Oh
can't
my
put
gosh, yeah.
down.
I mean, that was a big thing for me too. Was like that tooth and nail, especially in the band from that. Like, I would say early 2000s, 90s stuff was a little bit like I was. There's a lot like, but I don't know. I like a lot of the early tooth and nail stuff was great, but it just wasn't for me. But like like you start shifting into some of the early 2000s. You start talking like Thousand Foot Crutch, and
Yeah,
especially from that time period is fantastic. I love Thousand Foot Crutch. Don't get me wrong, but there's just something good about like Rockfest and all of that. That entire period is just great stuff.
absolutely. Were you a fan of like TVU, Radio U, all that kind of stuff back then? Dude, yeah.
Yeah, I may have something cool in that realm coming up soon, so keep an eye out for that. But it just related to that, just because I was from that period, so I'm working on something with that. That might be a cool feature coming up. But
Oh, dude, I'm so excited, man. Yeah, I remember like back in the day, they didn't have like the variety of music has changed nowadays. But like back in the TVU days, I remember back in the day, my relative would come on over, my grandma would come over and check, watch us while my parents were gone, and then we'd have TVU on, and they'd circle the same 10, 11 videos all day, and I'm sure my grandma loved that, man. She was, getting to
Right.
rock out to Chevelle all day.
Right. But I think that was just a great period for music in general.
Yeah.
Man, I tell you what, that just got me reminiscing again. But
Lincoln Park came out during that era, and you know, POD, like they were out for a long time, but like they really started kind of popping a lot. I remember in high school, maybe seventh, sixth grade, and like it's cool because we felt like we knew the bands that all our friends were talking about slightly before our friends were talking about them, and that
oh
was
wow,
what made it kind of cool. Everybody was like, "Oh, dude, have you heard POD?" Like,
like
and we're like, "Dude,
yeah.
yeah." Like, and so like I used to again record over my dad's cassette tapes and then put like Christian music or good just music. I was like, if you think POD's cool, why don't you check out this? So I would smuggle a whole bunch of just different Christian artists in my sixth grade classroom and just be distributing free mixtapes for everybody.
Oh yeah, I mean absolutely. Uh, my story was a little bit more interesting. It took me a little bit. I was a little bit delayed on picking up some of that stuff. My favorite period is the early 2000s, but I discovered it in the later like almost to like 2007, 8, somewhere in there when I started to go back and kind of pick up some of the early 2000s. Just because I was a little bit later on picking some of that up. My start my start really into breaking out and figuring out there was more to Christian music than what was being sung on the church stage was DC Talk. That was my
Oh,
start,
dude. Yeah.
right? And it was like, and it's funny because my start in DC Talk, I got that. Oh my gosh, I think I heard my first DC Talk in 2004,
Mm-hmm.
and most of them would think that okay, well, if I heard DC Talk in 2004, okay, it's Jesus Freak because that's if you hear DC Talk in that period, like that's what they were known for. Nope, nope. I was listening to New Thang from DC Talk. Came out in 1990, I believe, as a matter of fact. And
Oh,
DC Talk
wow.
from 1990 did not sound like DC Talk from 1995 or even 1998. It was a huge difference. It was rap. And it was like that, like late 80s, early 90s, like rap. And it's fantastic if that's your thing. It might feel cheesy, but it's still great. There's got a special place for me. But and I was like, okay, that's different. And then I started listening to, okay, I'm like, well, what else DC Talk? And I asked for DC Talk CD for Christmas. I got a special, like the greatest hits. And I'm like, I put that in and I about fell out of my chair because it was not the same at all. It was not even close
Dude, I'm going to have to
because
check. So it's called New Thing?
New
Or New Thing?
Thing, New
Okay,
Thing,
okay.
Nuthang, New Thing.
I am going to
It was
check
a
that
rap
out.
album. You got to get that 80s or 90s like rap mentality. Go New Thang, right? But
New Thing!
yeah, it was a bit cheesy and it was great. But I threw it in, and then Jesus Freak is what made me say, "Wait a second, you can do Christian music that heavy?" I laugh at that now, but and that was my first foray. Now, my funny part is my first controversial music that piece of music that I had got my hands on was what I mean. Really, it's not like controversial too much, but it would have been for parents that weren't quite exposed to that yet. I had "Song to Burn Your Bridges" by from Project 86, and when
Oh,
parents
yeah.
find that album and look at that cover, they're going, "What is this? Get this out of my house!" And that's exactly what happened. Especially because I flipped over in the lyric book and pointed and say, "Oh yeah, this is Christian. What is that?" And you look at the first song, "Spy Hunter." Love that song. That was one of Project 86's biggest relative songs. And the chorus is like, "We caught you plotting murder, and now the tide is turning, and it'll beat our bones upon your empire burning." You're like, what?
How
But
did you explain that one away to
I
your parents?
didn't. It had to go away.
Oh, no. See, yeah.
I wasn't in that position, right? It's like, and nowadays you look at back, it's like, you don't have to be, like blatantly Christian in music to still be artistic and reflective and have a good song that doesn't have to speak Jesus all the time. It's like you
Dude,
can
I
be,
was in the same boat, man. Like I had a Project 86 CD hidden in the under the bed. I had a Blindside CD in the ceiling tile. Then I would put, an Eminem CD in the trash, and then, I was just a mixed bag of every sort of different kind of music you could imagine. But like I said, it took a while, but I think after a point, like, my parents started to kind of be cool with the brunt of everything, and
Oh yeah,
just kind of,
especially if they're like, okay, I think he knows what he's doing. I think we can trust
yeah,
him not to put something dumb in his ears.
you know,
Um,
yeah,
uh, well, okay, so that's kind of bringing me around a little bit because we're talking about like some of the old artists and stuff. But what's kind of interesting is you're kind of seeing a resurgence of some of those older artists that we kind of grew up on coming back,
yeah,
right?
yeah,
I think a few years ago, Blindside put out some new music. We're like, what happened here, right? Cutlass has been teasing new music now for like 3 years. There had been at least one new song.
yep,
Um,
yep,
Project 86 is the big one for me right now because, uh, he'd been talking about new music for, gosh, it was like, I'm doing new music and it'll be the final album. He said that in March of 2020.
yeah,
Now,
yeah,
yeah, now mind you, it took a while, but and I'll tell you this, I've spoken about the amazingness of Patreon. Um, because like it's just a great way to support somebody. But he'd been talking on his Patreon about that, and the reason it took so long is because it to make good art you have to spend time on it, and he had to make sure it was right. He spent the extra time on it, and I tell you what, my personal opinion, I think the new albums, because there's two of them, are fantastic. It was
yeah.
definitely well worth the wait. I don't know if you've had what do you, have you listened to any of the new Project 86 music at all?
You know what? I'm gonna have to. I know that they're, like I said, they're kind of on that chart, and I see that they're coming out with new stuff, and so I'm gonna have to check it out, man, because I love Project 86. I actually, in one of my older bands, got the chance to open for them in Elmira, New York, and I never met them in person because I think Andrew was kind of, just off doing his thing, chilling and hanging out. But it was sure a freaking killer show, and
Oh
so
gosh, yeah.
I enjoyed it, and it was just one of those things where it's like before I moved away from New York and my first initial band broke up, that was one of the things that was kind of a highlight to me, getting to kind of hang out and open for them, and so huge. Like I feel like we have a lot in common in that way too, where it's just like kind of the same bands as well. Like Project 86 would have been in that vein of like one of the first that I heard that was kind of like flip the switch.
Oh yeah, no, absolutely. I'll tell you what. Okay, so you haven't listened, go listen to it because and this is true with any band. I think every band is going to have that thing where you put out something just mind blowing, and you put out many other albums or whatever else. You're going to get the fans to go say, "I want more drawing black lines."
Yeah.
The whatever it is, always going back to that one thing that everybody loves so much, and they're going to keep repeating it. It doesn't sound like this. I didn't want that. Well,
Yeah. Yeah.
so for the example of that, right? So Project 86 New Music, which is now P86 Omni, by the way, not just Project 86 anymore. They're not called that anymore, but because what they've done is their sound is so fundamentally different. Is he's given them themselves a new name, and I tell you, it does echo back to like a drawing black lines heavy, but then
Awesome.
runs past that line and just keeps going. Like, so the first album he put out last year was fantastic. I probably listened to that. It was on the top of my list last year. And then he just released the second part of that album this last month here, and he broke it down into two pieces. He called the first half the electronic EP, and the second half the brutality EP.
Oh wow,
and
dude,
and
that's awesome.
and and it is heavy. So if you're into heavy music, first and foremost, go check that out. But there's a lot of great heavy music coming um, from everybody. I'm telling you. But anyways, but
Yeah.
I just because we're talking about the music, I had to bring that up because it's just so interesting to see a lot of the old bands coming back and doing new music.
Yeah, I got the
Um,
chance to tell Andrew on a Skype one time that his song, I think it was called Pipe Dream,
oh
uh,
yeah, that
was the
drawing black
first
lines from yeah.
was the first song I ever illegally downloaded on Napster. So
Oh
I
my
was like, dude, I am part of the problem. I apologize, but it was just too good, man. And so yeah, I think he forgives me. I think I think
He
he's
does, yeah, yeah. I think he's just got about just as much good humor about that as everybody else does at this point because it's we all like, oh man, I downloaded so much legal music. Well, it almost feels like that nowadays with streaming, right? Because you
yeah.
literally just go click and play. It's just as easy as it used to be. You're still paying for it now. You are paying for it now, but you're practically not paying for it. I mean, you're making just about as much money now off of streaming as you would have back then. So, anyways, but so like, just thinking about that, like, what do you think about this? Has been something I've been kind of noticing as interesting pattern.
Yeah.
It's going one of two ways right now. I'm seeing a lot of bands do this is either direction. So first and foremost, cover albums are becoming a big thing again.
Yep.
Like Wolves in the Gate just did Lost in Translation, which one of my favorite cover albums because they did really well with it. But then I see the other direction. I've been seeing artists have released albums of their music. They're like an old album, re-releasing it, but then having other people come and cover it on that album instead. So they're not the ones performing their music. They're having other
Yeah.
artists come and do that, right? We've
Yeah.
seen that quite a bit in different various forms, right? So Switchfoot just did it with The Beautiful Letdown. They did both ways. They re-recorded the entire album in a whole new version because they thought it'd be kind of cool for the 20th anniversary. Then they said, okay, everybody we know, come record your version of the song, which is actually kind of cool because like you get to hear all kinds of interpretations, like Tyler Joseph from like 21
Yep.
Pilots and Reliant K come and did a one of the songs from that album and things like that.
Yep.
And then this year, or like last 6 months, Does But Crutch has been re-releasing The End Is Where We Begin, but like one song at a time, and then they're bringing on artists with them as they remaster the songs, and so it's got a little bit of a flavor of that artist.
Yes. Yes. I think that that's like a product of kind of this TikTok era that we're living in. People
Right.
just love to hear things in ways that they've never heard it before, and so to take something familiar and then just throw everybody a curveball with that. Like I know that if you've heard Skillet's Finish Line, they just recently did a song, a remix of that with Adam Gontier from 3 Days Grace, and so, or now Saint Estonia. And so now, yeah,
Right.
I think we're living in this era where it's kind of just like people love to hear different things or the same familiar things in a different way. I'm actually, if you've heard my song "Dear God" that I had put out, a couple years ago, after the next release we do, I'm going to try to re-release that in a different version. And so, yeah, I think that is
And go for it, right? Because that's a thing that's working right now. So absolutely should do it, right?
Yeah, and I think it's also really cool to not only give something like that fans want, but it also like instead of kind of spending all this money on new songs, which is awesome. Like I'll never deprive the fans of new songs, but it is kind of cool to have one single song that you can split up 15 different ways, keep your fans entertained while you're gearing up for those big releases. You know what I mean? And so
Yeah.
it's a cool way to just do things differently. And I think that you would have never seen this back in the day, but like with this new kind of how everybody's doing things, this is going to become a huge thing. I feel like.
Oh no, for real. And I'm glad you brought up the Skillet remix there, but I think that's kind of interesting to bring up because not only is this happening, but it's happening not necessarily with artists you would see with the Christian artist. I
Yeah.
brought up the Thousand Foot Crutch one because I thought that one stood out to me quite a bit. Like the most recent one they just released was "Let the Sparks Fly"
Yeah.
with Adam from Saint Estonia. Like they've had like Saint Estonia, they've had let's see, Eva Under Fire, New Medicine, Art of Dying, and then what was it, Adelita's Way.
Yeah.
All doing
Yeah.
all these, they're literally going through the entirety of that album, re-releasing every song with somebody else on it, and none of them have been traditionally associated with Christian music. So that's been kind of an interesting movement too, and I think that's actually I kind of like the idea because you're kind of putting some great music and great messages out in front of other audiences that wouldn't have gotten here in the first place.
Yeah, man, I love that idea of just like, yeah, because then they're not, you're putting this in front of people that aren't looking for a particular, Christian music or anything like that. If you can, and that's kind of the goal with, the songs that I do as well. I like to write songs that are kind of more general, but that kind of like cast a wide web, you know what I mean? And so that like, nobody that would listen to Fuel would assume that I took some inspiration from a Bible verse, but they're just listening
Right.
to it on like a instinctive level and kind of soaking it in. And so, yeah, you get people that like are listening and they don't even realize that they're appreciating Christian music, but they are. And so that's
Right.
cool that like it's cast such a wide web. I love, what John did with the, Adam from St. Estonia and all that. So dude, it's just a really cool thing. And like I said, we're living in an age now where you can do something on your phone 15 different ways and get even more views than you would a full-fledged music video, with a whole huge budget. Not just throw any shade on music videos. We all love a good produced music video, but at the same time, for the artist, it becomes a little easier too, or at least an option where you can go like, hey man, I'll record the same 15 seconds of this clip of this song in 15 different ways, and now I'm not like necessarily having to pay for a music video because as we know, the music industry is so like tough nowadays that you kind of have to make your content last, and so in some ways there's so much noise that it's hard to kind of break through, but in other ways like the creativity has definitely increased.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I guess, and this is something I've been asking a lot too, and I'm just curious to see where you sit on that. Is like, um, we're in this interesting time too, where the Christian music label, the label of being a Christian artist and things, it's kind of in a different light now. Some
Yeah.
people say, "No, I'm not a Christian," or I'm not a Christian band. I'm a
Hmm.
Christian and I do music, but that's different.
Yeah.
Um, and that's been kind of getting some mixed reviews from Christian music fans. They're like, "Oh, you're leaving us and walking." I'm like, I don't know. I mean, where do you sit with some of that movement now? Because
Hmm.
th- there's some interesting space in that too, because it breaks into some other things. But let's start there.
Yeah. So for me, I definitely don't shy away from the fact that I am a Christian band. Not really scared of the label, but like a label's just as good as what you do with it, right? And so if I'm in an environment where like I know, like I've opened for secular band, I've opened for Smile Empty Soul before, I've opened for another rap, even a rap artist named Bubba Sparks that you wouldn't consider to be Christian. My whole music journey, started as being a Christian playing bars and clubs before we did a lot with Seventh Day Slumber. And so I wouldn't necessarily go in being like, hey, my name's Matt, I'm the Christian band. But at the end of the show, I would always be sure, no matter where we were, to say something about my faith. And so I think with how you approach it, it's like if you go in there and you're doing like 15 worship songs in a row, you're going to get obviously, people are going to tune you out. But if
Oh,
you
absolutely.
if you go in there knowing like, okay, I've got one shot to make this count and relate to people, and at the same time tell something authentic, then I think it's cool because and it also does go back to the authenticity thing too. If you go in there and you're just hammering them with a message every single time, something that they're not looking for, you're going to get shunned. But at the same time, if you say something truly authentic, that where the song came from, or like, hey man, this song's called Dear God. I went through a series of abuse, and I just want to let you know that if you leave here tonight, I want you to let you know that there's a God that loves you, that wants to know you, and craft it that way, and then you're on to your song. People tend to respect that. I think it all comes down to knowing where to draw the line between trying to preach people to death and say something truly authentic that resonates.
No, absolutely. But that kind of shapes into the next level of that, though, right? Because you're getting, oh, I'm a Christian band. I'm a Christian that does Christian music, but then there's the next layer of that. Yeah, no, I don't have anything to do with God. I just said I'm deconstructing. You're getting people that have traditionally identified as a Christian or in a Christian band and have now gone the complete opposite way. You know, um,
Yeah, yeah, I've seen
and
a
that's
lot
been
of that.
an interesting time frame for that, right? Especially, I would say it's probably really been the last 5 to 7 years. It's really become a big deal. You know,
Hmm.
and that's an interesting thing to think about. Uh, uh, does that make them not okay to listen to anymore? I don't think so. That's kind of where my mind is at. Like now, I mean, if it's blatantly like, okay, that's not okay to be listening to, then okay, there's a different thing because there's a difference between okay, it's still good music, and they're not singing about something that's gonna like really put me in a bad space. Go for it.
Yeah,
That's my mind. Like you have your own convictions. You listen to, you've got your own place. Listen to what you like, and that's fine.
sure. Yeah, I think there's
But
also something to be said for like I was having this debate yesterday with somebody on my Facebook wall because they were like, taking something inherently rebellious and free and turning it Christian is just disgusting and gross. And I was just thinking how close-minded these progressive people kind of are because I can sit there and I can think about a million bands that don't identify as Christian that I can take something and I go like, I love that. I love Chester Bennington's voice. I love his songs. I love how emotional they are. I love, even like, just elements of like, okay, I don't necessarily agree with the message of like a Marilyn Manson, but I like the theatrics of his live show. I
sure,
like a lot of things. So you can take different things from different people that you don't necessarily identify with, and then put that same effort and energy into what you're doing. And so like I just found it weird to hear that of like, oh, taking something as inherently as free as rock and roll and turning it Christian is just disgusting. I'm like, well, you're claiming to be like open minded and all these kinds of things, and rock and roll is essentially about speaking truth to power and being open minded, and but you're the one thing that you're not progressive with is how I conduct my life, and so I can take from lots of just different bands in the mainstream and say I love something about it.
yeah, no, and I think that's the reality. Is I think there's good music all around us, and I don't think there's any reason to turn it down. I think the biggest thing is just support those that you believe in, and be careful about what you put in your ears because that's just you don't want to put something bad in there, but it's okay to listen to something that's not traditionally Christian because that's okay. It
Yeah,
really is. I have a lot like that, right? I think we both do at this point, but it's just been an interesting, like the Christian music industry has been in this weird headspace, I think, for the last several years. So it's been an interesting thing to kind of watch, right? I think that's part
yeah,
of where like the the Grizzly Awards birthed out of was like the Christian award shows were completely looking past rock. you
yeah,
know they might the closest they were getting to anything that's outside of like a CCM type thing was Christian rap.
yeah,
And even then they would toss them a single award. They weren't, the CCM they could have, gosh, I mean, 8 awards that were available to them. Christian
yeah,
rock was even like there was a Christian rock award, but how many of those were actually Christian rock artists versus just CCM that they put some more distortion on their guitars for that song? And so that's kind of like where stuff like the Grizzly Awards, but it's been kind of an interesting, you know, time period because it seems like Christian rock has been kind of it's always been, sometimes it always feels like it's the ugly stepsister of Christian music, but like it feels like we're kind of moving back into that space again where it's like
yeah,
I don't know if
yeah. I
and
think the thing with like Christian rock, it's just we're in a space right now where like I love all Christian rock, but there just needs to be a new voice saying very interesting things, and once that happens, I think people will resonate, and not that there isn't, but it just needs to be amplified somehow. Once there's a
yeah,
new artist saying very interesting things that people can't refuse to pay attention to, then the pendulum starts to swing, and it'll swing back to rock. it might look a little different than what we know as rock, but new elements, new things. Um, but I don't know. The fan base is always going to be there. So I mean,
Oh, sure. But I think part of it is like I think the fan base doesn't know where to find it anymore. I think a lot of the traditional outlets that you used to go to find Christian rock music is disappearing. You know, for
yeah,
me, when I was growing up, I'd go to the Christian bookstore and look for that music and things like that. I'd go turn on I turn on TBN at like 11 o'clock on a Saturday night to find the simulcast of Radio U or
yeah,
TV or whatever. But some of those outlets that used to exist for that are gone, so it's harder to find it if you don't know where to look. You know,
yeah,
and I think that's part of why I want to do the podcast is like, well, let's get some of these more independent type people on the forefront again.
yeah. It reminds me of a conversation I had this last year. I was doing a thing in Isle, Minnesota called Rural Fest. That's Rural, rural. I can't ever pronounce that, but so what that was is a festival dedicated to pretty much all CCM artists. They had Mark Schultz, they had Tasha Layton, they had Sanctus Real, all sorts of different CCM bands over the course of like this 3 day festival. And somehow somebody had caught wind of me, and I was included on the festival. And so after my set, we were playing, and I had numerous people come up to me and be like, "Dude, we need more of this on this kind of show." So maybe you're right. Like it's just they don't know where to find it, but if they were exposed to it, they would, you know what I mean? They would definitely enjoy it. And I think we
Yeah,
might.
I mean,
Never
yeah,
mind.
absolutely. You know, and I think that's so interesting too. And that's something I was talking to another group about. You'll hear on a later episode for those that hang out for more episodes. But we were talking about that. Uh, Festivals like Kingdom Come, I think, do a great job of a very diverse uh, music selection, right? You
Yeah.
know, I was talking to Brutality. You'll hear about this in a future episode, but we were talking to them about like it was funny for me because on one hand, I've got Brutality on one stage and Honey Tree on the second stage. Like,
Yeah.
it's like at the same time you've got two complete opposite ends of the spectrum going on, and it's kind of cool that you get to go to a festival and see such diversity in music. And I love that, and there should be that because that gets to expose people to things they may not normally get to listen to.
Yeah, you would
Um,
think that we're in the right era for it because everybody's kind of creating their own playlist on Spotify, and they don't necessarily always listen to one genre. So it's kind of weird that like there's not more of those kinds of festivals, being created to where it's like, okay, over here's rock, over here's CCM. I mean, you've got some that are awesome, and we applaud you. We want more of that. It's cool when you can see that.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I think we're starting and I'm hoping it's continuing to be a trend, but I think we're starting to see a little bit of a shift in that direction again. And I think I'm going to hope to that out, hopefully I'm going to be a driver of that is to continue to drive diversity in music, right? Because I tell you what, so far on as of episode 6, I've had D Swan who does EDM.
Oh,
We've
I
had
know
Becca
him.
Hard,
Yeah, okay.
right? Right?
Yeah.
And yeah, right. So I've had D Swan with the EDM side. Uh, we've had like Becca who does just really heavy stuff, right? Um,
Reclaim the
Jamie
day.
Krasinski's heavy, right? You do some fantastic hard rock, but then now I'm going to be shifting gears a little bit too, and now we're going to go bring on Demac.
Oh, dude, that's
Demac will be
cool.
coming up in a future episode, and we're talking just straight rap there, right? And I'm telling you, when that episode comes out, you got to check that out. That's going to be a fantastic episode. But it's fun to bring on the diversity and get to hear the different music out there, especially because it's. I think you're right. I think that's reality. I don't think there's any human that doesn't have like some form of a diverse music taste. It might
Yeah.
not be like hard rock and then like country rock or whatever, but like for me it's like I'm not a country guy, but I do love I'm a rap hip hop guy mixed with rock, hard rock, southern rock is a soft spot. I'm like, I love some good southern rock.
Oh, dude,
um
that's cool, man.
uh,
Yeah.
uh
Yeah, that's awesome.
TJ Harris has put out some solo music in the past. TJ Harris Decipher Down. I think it technically can be called country music, but it's
Mhm.
my kind of country music. That's actually a pun because that was one of his singles. Is my kind of country, but um, eh, and it's just fun to have a diverse taste because you can kind of put on all kinds of things. So I think that I want to see more of that. So I'm hoping to be a driver of that, but it's a kind of fun era. It really is. You're right. It's a fun time to be.
Yeah, it comes with its frustrations, of course. But again, with everything, there's an equal and opposite reaction. So I feel like, in time, something new will be created to kind of help artists a little more. But at the same time, like I said, you can create a 3-minute clip on your phone that gets 10 times the views of a music video sometimes. And so it's just like, it just comes down to how you're doing it, if it's captivating to people, and if you've got an audience that loves what you do. It's really a strange time, but yeah, glad to be a part of it, dude.
No, absolutely. No, it's just great, and I'm glad you came on the episode. I want to kind of shift back down a little bit, and I try to finish this way as much as I can, but because I think it's important to kind of hear this message, whatever that might be. But it's like, um, this is a platform. May not be a big platform, right? It's a podcast, and I may not have a huge amount of people listening. We're
Day
hoping,
one
we're
day though,
hoping,
man.
but right. But no, I mean, I could have 1,000. There could be, anyways. But the idea is this is still a platform, and I want to give everybody that opportunity to say, like, God forbid, maybe this is that last time you really get to speak out, and what is that one thing that if this is your last opportunity to say something, what is it you're going to say? What is it that this is your last moment to tell these people something? What is it that you want to tell them right now?
Oh man, it's just you matter. You know what I mean? You're understood. And I think that's the basis of everything that I do on and off stage is to make people feel understood. When I, was going through all the things that I was going through with the abuse at home, with, feeling kind of, what is the word? Just misplaced in a lot of life. I wished I would have heard more music that kind of spoke to those struggles. And so I'm a person that was highly insecure as a kid. I was a person that really didn't think he would mount to much. And I am living proof that, you know, you can do something meaningful and that, oftentimes, like I said, the dark things that you're going through can serve as fuel to go further and to do things that matter. You just got to stick with it and you got to continue on your path and not give up.
No, absolutely. That's a fantastic message. I'm, man. So with that being said, I appreciate you coming on, and we've already taken up enough of your time, but I always want to give the opportunity in the back end of that to say, okay, where do we find Matt and everything you're doing online?
Yeah, man. So mattsassano.com is kind of the hub for everything. We're going to get the website reconstructed. So if you really want like a message back, I always love like corresponding with fans. Instagram, Facebook, Matt Sassano. Just check me out and drop me a message and say, hey, I love to chat with everybody who comes my way.
Okay, well, fantastic. I want to take that and push that one step further, though. If somebody wants to actually like support you,
Yeah.
what is the most effective way to support Matt and what you do?
Oh man. So yeah, man, just go on the website, check out, some of the merch and the CDs. I got my album In Defiance on there. Also, just donations go a long way. Even if you support the message, you have somebody that could resonate with it, go and donate. Um, yeah, I mean, any donation, there'll be a donation button on the website eventually, or I'll just give you the information. Maybe you can put it up on the screen like after the episode or something like that, so I can just know best where to kind of direct people. But it
Perfect.
definitely does help.
Yeah. So, and one thing I always do, right? So we are in audio world. We're in audio land. I always say, if your website's your name, something like that, I would say spell it out. Make sure we can. So for those in the back, make sure they can write this down. Spell out your name for us. First, mattsassano.com. Give me a good spelling of that.
All right, MattSassano.
mattsassano.com. Do it. Check it out. Got some great music. Again, like I said, he is literally number 1 on the charts as of the recording of this episode. And wouldn't you know it, I wouldn't be surprised if your next single does it again. So there's a reason he's there. Go check it out. Thanks everybody for tuning in and listening. Thanks Matt for joining us. And special thanks to D Swan for allowing us use of his fantastic song for the theme music, Haters. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. This has been episode 6 of the Where Will We Begin podcast. Have a great day, evening, or wherever you might be listening.